It's raining, it's windy, I'm wet and miserable. Welcome back to North Yorkshire and to the Renault Zoe 50. Excuse the wind. This is a car I should have had months ago, but due to some sort of global event, we couldn't do it back then. But now it's here, and it's a car I'm very much looking forward to driving because in terms of how much you spend per mile of range, this is the top of the leaderboard. It gives you the most range for the least amount of money. So I'm interested to find out how Renault have done that. First I'm going to look around the outside, then the inside, and then take it for a drive before I get soaked right through. It's clearly a Zoe, it looks like the old one, and that's not a bad thing because that was a good looking car. So even though it's been out for 8 years, and this just is a facelift, it's not an all new Zoe, I think they've done a very good job updating a good looking car. LED headlights, I like the trim around the fog lights there, that's quite nice. These little kind of flecks of silver down there, but that's just on this trim. I think overall it's a good looking car, maybe one of the better looking EVs on the market. So, so far, so good. Still looks like a Zoe, but just a little bit of a refresh. From the side, you'd probably be forgiven if you thought they haven't actually touched it at all, because I don't think they have actually changed anything. It basically looks like the previous car. Again, not a bad thing. And it's still got this very high waistline on the windows. And that's not just an aesthetic design choice, it's actually a good practical design choice, because what shorter windows or less surface area of glass means is that during the winter you will lose less heat because there's less glass to lose that heat, so therefore you have to put less effort into keeping that car warm, you use less energy. And in summer you won't absorb as much through the glass from the sun, which means you have to put less effort into cooling the car down, and again it helps extend the range. So I quite like the fact that Renault have done that. That's good thinking. From the back, again, they've pretty much not changed a thing other than the rear lights, which front and back are LED now. So yeah, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. It's a good looking car. It's got that pert French posterior, and I think it's a good looking car. So far so good. Now the boot is something which a lot of people I think is a lot smaller than it actually is. This is a good sized boot. Let me go get the camera. This has obviously got the bags that came with the press car, but ultimately you will get a lot in that. It's got the false floor removed for reasons I am not sure of, but normally there would be a false floor in there, so that is just extra storage. But you would absolutely get any size shop at the supermarket in that, no problems at all. Granted, you're probably not going to be camping, but in terms of a super mini, this is one of the bigger boots around. So yeah, it's a good practical boot. You just flick that open to get to your home charger, for example, and this comes down to get to CCS. But unfortunately, it's not quite as straightforward as that because you don't get CCS as standard with the Zoe. And that's something I'm going to talk about later on in the video. But for me, I'm kind of disappointed. You also cannot use the key fob to get to the charger. You have to do it from inside the car, which isn't a major thing, but would it kill them to put a button on there? Okay, let's have a look around the inside now. Nice to be out of that lovely rain. Steering wheel. I like the feel of this. It feels pretty good, pretty solid. Interior, not so much. I like this little kind of metal part here, although I'm not sure if it's actually metal. And you've got quite easy access to buttons, and just behind the steering wheel you've got some more buttons for the stereo, so volume up and down and whatnot. I'll come to that more in a bit later though. So yeah, the steering wheel feels pretty good. The rest of the dash, I have to say, you can probably see me depressing it there. Soft touch, it's good. It's not kind of cheap, scratchy materials, which I'm not a big fan of in cars. So that's kind of goes along the entire dash. Carries on here. Obviously, there are various different trims. This is the GT line, top spec. And if you look there, you can probably see a really nice high definition, high contrast display in the dash pinnacle. That for me is really, really good. Let me just turn the car on for a second. Ooh, little beeps. And yeah, I like this. I like the fact that most cars are going down this digital kind of dash route. And for me, it really does stand out. I like that a lot. And you can bring up various things, you know, sat nav and state of charge and whatnot on it. That I will come to later on because I have a little bit of a beef about it. But let me carry on. You got a bit of storage down here, which is where you can put the key, and that will charge the key fob as well, because obviously it's got a lot of electronics in it these days. It's a wireless key fob. Proper knobs, yes, look, Turning knobs, I like this. For the basics, for me personally anyway, you should have some manual control so you don't have to take your eyes off the road when you're driving to be able to change the basics, like climate control. Weirdly though, there is no actual physical knob to adjust the volume. You have to do that here. You can do it there, of course, behind the steering wheel, so you can do it with your hands, but I would like a turning knob. I think that's always a lot easier to operate, but yeah, I think you can get away with just having that. So yeah, a bit of storage down here. You've got the gear selector there, which it feels really nice. I like that a lot. Let me just swap hands. Kind of reminds me of that thing you see on the newer Star Trek movies where they kind of go to warp. So my geekiness is definitely standing out there. Further back, you've got the handbrake. So that's pretty good. Wireless charging for your phone. So that's where you can store that, or even though mine doesn't actually wirelessly charge. So good bit of storage for your phone. You've got nice cup holders here. Good size for large bottles. And you can fit them just about in this door bin. But I've put the seat far back. If I just push this forward to my normal position, and I only have little legs, granted, it's not the easiest to get things in and out of because you can't actually fit your forearm and something in your hand at the same time. You have to kind of reach forward. Not amazing space between the seat and the door, and the materials are quite cheap compared to like this really nice soft dash material. So this, yeah, you know, it's not a major problem. Given the price of this car and other things it has, the main touch points are perfectly fine. You know, this bit here, the buttons are okay, the switch gear's all right. So if this bothers you, then yeah, fair enough. But to be honest, I don't think it really will. There is a little bit of a lack of storage in this car in terms of closed storage, where you want to hide things away. In fact, there almost isn't any at all. You can put your phone there, and that's obviously going to go with you. You can put stuff there, but again, you're not going to leave things on display if you're going out of the car. There is only this glove box, and they've done the usual French thing of only giving you half a glove box because the fuse box is in the way. That is obviously because it's a right-hand drive version of a left-hand drive car, but every other manufacturer, other than it seems French ones, doesn't have that issue. This bit here is where the glove box would be, obviously, on a left-hand drive car, so I'm guessing that's just an empty void behind there. So it'd be nice to have a bit of storage here in a right-hand drive version, because, as I said, that's kind of a semi-pointless glove box, really, due to the fact that the fuse box is taking all that space up. You do have some more storage here, but again, it's not closed storage, it's not out of the way, people can see it if they look in the car, so yeah, it's a bit of a lack of storage, which isn't a major issue, but it is one that's worth noting. At least you do have physical buttons in this car, which is good. I always like physical buttons, even though if they're a little bit wobbly, it's like a kid's tooth, it does wobble a little bit, but I don't think you're going to have any problems really in terms of build quality. It does feel like a solid car. Of course, you've got black gloss as usual. Every car these days has to come with black gloss. Little bit of a reflection issue, but for the most part, that's not a problem. In terms of how you operate this, it's actually very easy to operate. You can get to the sat-nav, it's reasonably quick, and as I said, it's easy to operate. I always like things that are easy, and they're not too slow to react either. Again, bit of an odd thing that you have to use this for the volume, or the steering wheel control over there, but for the most part, this is quite nice. However, as I said, do have a little bit of a problem with this entire arrangement here. Now, this might not bother you at all. It's an aesthetic thing, but for me, I look at this and I think it dates the interior immediately. It's a brand new car, and this makes it look like a 10-year-old car because it reminds me of an old Android tablet or an original iPad 1. Look at the size of the bezel around the edge. Every phone, every TV, every tablet that's out over the last few years comes with screens that go right to the edge, the narrowest of bezels to make the most out of the screen you have. And this has got a bigger screen than the lower spec versions as well. So I don't know, it's black gloss, which attracts fingerprints, and that's a bugbear for me, but ultimately I just think this sort of design ethos in a touch interface hasn't been around for years, and it kind of, as I said, it just dates it for me. It looks like it's been slapped on the dash. Do you remember when you used to go to Halfords and you saw those DIN units that had a screen that came out and then flipped up? That's what I think of when I look at that. Now, to back up my claim that it looks slapped on the dash, an afterthought, there's clearly a vent behind there that's been blanked out. This has been designed with that not there in mind, and it just doesn't make sense to me. And this is the top spec model. As I said, it's got a bigger screen. Why would you have this as a design feature behind a screen? It's not integrated into the dash. You can tell that this is sat on top of the dash there because it literally is screwed to it. So for me, I don't understand this. This is a brand new car. This dashboard is fantastic. It feels great. It's new. It's a good design. That digital display there is brilliant. This is nice. This is good. It's good fit and finish. Don't get me wrong. The interface on here is nice. It's like it's been designed by a different design team to the rest of the car. Almost like the guy that led this design team that did this is just about to retire, and he thinks his Windows Vista laptop is state of the art. And to carry on that theme of like an old school thing, I mean, look, we've got blanked out buttons, which, I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw a car that had blanked out buttons for things that you couldn't afford to spec on it. You know, these are all right. You've got all this sort of stuff down here. And look on the steering wheel as well. Look, blanked out, blanked out, blanked out. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. No other manufacturer has blanked out button these days because it was always seen to kind of, like I said, highlight what you couldn't afford in the car. So that's very strange design choice on a brand new 2020 car. Down here we've got a 12-volt adapter, which is fine, that's good. And then we've got an auxiliary input from the 1990s, which I don't think anybody's ever going to use, but I guess you could include in a car these days. 2 USB ports, which is fine, but again, I would expect a USB-C port by now. Right, let's have a look inside the back. Ugh. Get out of the wind, get out of the wind. Right, now this seat is in a position for someone who's quite tall, at least 6 foot, and there's not a lot of space, if I'm honest. Not a lot of space at all. My feet can sort of go under there, but yeah, so it's a little bit cramped here, and the fact that this is an integrated headrest rather than a separated one means that you do feel really enclosed. You have to kind of bend to the side to get anything out. So it's not bad visibility from the side. The door pockets, they're all right. But ultimately, it's a little bit cramped in here. Again, not a huge amount of space. You would probably struggle to get 3 in, certainly. So I would say that this is definitely a super mini in terms of what you would use it as. You'd be fine with kids in the back, but in terms of adults, probably only short trips only. I'm not a tall person at all, but I have maybe an inch or 2 above my head. So in the back, especially getting in and out, I think, as I said, tall people are going to have a bit of an issue, but I suspect it's mainly going to be kids in the back of something like this rather than, you know, constantly ferrying adults about. So you'll be all right for short journeys, as I said, but I think it's kids only in the back, really. This is where the car's size kind of shows itself. The pedestrian sounder on this, which I probably can't pick up on the mic here, it reminds me of, I don't know, a monk's choir. It's quite therapeutic. Not a problem, and they all have to have it legally these days. Oh, it's like you got a church choir in the boot. Now, I haven't mentioned the seats yet. This, for me, is a possible issue for some people because the base doesn't move up or down at all. It is fixed. It goes forwards and backwards, and you can move this, you know, forwards and backwards. You can tilt your back, but ultimately, there's no adjustment up or down on this, and some people might find that getting a comfortable driving position is an issue. Most people who drive a Zoe, my brother included, who is a little bigger than me, he managed to find a nice comfortable driving position, and like I said, he actually owned a Zoe, and most people who drive one do manage to achieve that, but you have to do it by moving the steering wheel in and out or up and down to get to that position. So all I can suggest is, if you are thinking about getting one, make sure you've sat in one and got a comfortable position first, because it's very unusual today to find a car with fixed seats. The Zoe comes with 2 variants, 110 brake horsepower and 135 in terms of the motor you can specify. This is the 135, the GT line, and to be honest, if you're going to go for it, if you can afford it, I would, because it just makes that extra bit of difference compared to the 110. Especially when you get to motorway speeds, it just feels a more modern vehicle. You know, it gives it a little bit extra power when you're going from kind of 40 to 70 that the other one kind of ran out of breath a little bit at. Both are perfectly fine for around town, quite nippy in fact, due to the instant torque of an EV that they all have. But yeah, if you can stretch to it, I'd go for the 135. It just gives you a little bit more. It's hardly hot hatch performance, but you know, it's not a hot hatch car, is it? You shouldn't expect that. But ultimately, when you do put your foot down, come on. It's a bit wet, granted. It gets going. As I said, when you get to kind of 45-ish, it starts to get a bit breathless, but it's not going to be disappointing, I don't think, to anyone that owns one. It's going to be a town vehicle, predominantly city, urban driving. So if you're wanting to drive it around beautiful country roads like this, it'll be all right. But again, it's no hot hatch. When it does get twisty, it does roll a little bit, and these seats aren't very supportive. But again, how often are you going to go around these twisty roads or chicanes in this? It's not designed for that purpose. So I'd like a little bit more bolster support personally, but it's comfortable enough. Top speed in this particular car is 87 miles per hour. That's not great, but anybody watching this in the UK, it shouldn't matter, should it? Because the top legal speed anywhere is 70, and nobody watching this channel ever breaks the speed limit. But when you're doing 70, maybe 75 on, you know, like a track, being so close to the top speed is a little bit weird. Although I suspect the car can probably go quicker than that, so you're not straining the motor. I just think they've limited it probably to stop people doing silly things. Compared to the previous Zoe, it is quieter in here. So they've definitely done some big improvements into the dynamics of this car, but there's a little bit of tyre noise, a little bit of wind noise, but in EV terms, it's not the quietest. In car general terms, because it's electric, it's a very quiet car. It's a comfortable car. I've managed to find a decent position, even though the seat doesn't move up and down. So I think, you know what, you'll be fine. And up front, plenty of space too. Now, range. Renault say, I think you get about 150, 60 miles in winter and about 230 in summer. So let's say an average of about 200 miles year round. I think that's about fair. And that, when you think about it, is an awful lot. That is long range by today's EV standards. And for a car that starts at 26 and a bit £1,000 and goes above 30 if you start speccing things, compared to its competitors, that's actually very good. I mean, the Peugeot E208 is probably its closest direct rival in terms of cost, certainly. The Vauxhall Corsa E as well. If we do go off that average 200 miles year round, then the equivalent average real world range of the E208, for example, which is basically the same as the Corsa as well, I would say that's about 160 to 170 miles in the real world. So you're getting 30 to 40 miles more in this than you are in that. And they're about the same price, or at least the start of the same price. So it doesn't sound a lot, does it? 30 to 40 miles doesn't sound a lot. But believe me, if you're going on a long journey, it is. Think of it this way. With one stop, the E208 and Corsa E can do about 340 miles. So one stop, you've got 340 mile range. In the Zoe, with one stop, you've got 400 mile range. So that little bit of extra does actually make quite a big difference when you're going on a long journey. And of course, if you can't charge at home, it means you don't have to charge quite as often. So the real party piece, I guess, of the Zoe, of this car, is its range, because there's nothing really that comes close to it in this price bracket. Now I want to talk about something that might divide opinion a little bit. CCS charging on this is £1,000 option. If you go on Renault's website and you want the rapid charging option CCS, it's a grand extra. List price at least. That for me is unnecessarily high and expensive. It will not cost Renault £1,000 to add CCS charging to a Renault. I'm certain of that, because pretty much every vehicle that's on sale, bar the Skoda Citigo, comes with rapid charging by default and has done for years. Only Renault have excluded it as a default option. Now some will say, well, you're not paying for something if you don't want it. You're saving money by it not being default on the car. And I can get that to a point. I mean, where does that argument end? You're not paying for something that you don't want. Air conditioning is standard. Not everybody will want air conditioning, but it's standard because it's a benefit. It eases production line, and it's included in pretty much every car out there. I think CCS charging, well, any rapid charging, should be default. And the fact that every other manufacturer, apart from one version of the Skoda Citigo, includes rapid charging by default, that would kind of back up my claims that it makes sense. For me, it's just a trick that a lot of manufacturers do to have a headline cheaper price. I mean, the cheapest Renault Zoe, in terms of list price anyway, because there are discounts around, but the cheapest Renault Zoe you can get in terms of list price that comes with CCS rapid charging is just shy of £29,000. So if you want CCS, you're spending 29 grand, not the headline 26 and a bit grand price. You see what I mean? They're getting 3 grand extra for what most people would consider default. Not everyone will agree with this, which is fine, but personally, in 2020, no car should come without rapid charging. Part of me just wants to pick apart this car and make it sound as bad as possible, just to annoy Craig at the Renault Zoe Owners Club. But I have to say, if your expectations are on a level, you know, you're not expecting it to be a hot hatch, you're not expecting it to be a practical large family car. If you expect this to be a good range super mini, which is exactly what it is, I think you're going to get exactly what you think you're going to get. There are a few things I don't like, the way Renault do things, as I said, the CCS thing, this is a bit odd for me personally, but in terms of driving the car, its efficiency, its functionality, its practicality, in terms of, you know, in electric car terms especially, I can't really fault it. You know, it's a car that I think if you don't choose, it's probably based on aesthetic reasons, as opposed to it can't do something you want it to. So would I go for this car if it was me personally? Well, at the moment I have a Tesla Model 3 and we have a Mini Cooper S, petrol Mini Cooper S. So if I got rid of that and we thought, well, let's go full electric, would this be the one that would replace the Mini? You know what, it probably wouldn't for me personally, because range is far less of an important factor when you've got another car in the household. The E208 would be perfectly fine. In fact, to be honest, the new electric Mini with its 120 miles of range or something like that in the real world, that would be more than enough, because it's a second car. And I prefer that as a car, the way it drives, the way it feels, the way it looks, to this. The same with the E208. I would probably go for that over this if you exclude the range. However, if it's your only car, or you do intend on using it for longer journeys certainly, but if it's your only car, I think it has to be the Zoe. And then there's the Honda E. Although that's not a cheap car, but it's a similar price to this, I guess. Again, if range isn't a problem, I'd probably go for the Honda E over this. It's a far more individual and cool car, I guess, if you look at it that way. You do feel a little disconnected when you're driving this, in terms of, you know, it's clearly designed for town, city driving and to be as easy as possible to park, which a lot of people prefer. I like a more, how would you put it, connected drive. You know, something that makes me feel the road a bit better. This is kind of numb on the steering, but for everything else, it's absolutely fine. If you view a car as a tool, you'll enjoy driving this. Right, well, that's pretty much it, guys. If you're interested in more car reviews, I've got more press cars on the way, so if you like to watch them in the rain and grey mizzle of North Yorkshire, please do subscribe to the channel. As far as the Zoe goes, I don't think you'll be disappointed if you get one. There are a few little things, but what isn't there in any car that may annoy you? So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.